Hi YouTube, this is Joe Kelton with Kelton Cutlery. Visit me on the web, keltoncutlery.com. Okay, so yesterday I shot the video about the thinning out or regrinding, whatever you want to call it, on this little bitty paring knife. I didn't have a 940 that needed thinned out, but I did have this little paring knife. And if you remember, what we did was you know, now the blade stock on this is just fine, but they had a partial height hollow grind on it, and the edge was pretty thick. And so what we did was we just laid the blade on the stone. Okay, we tilted the blade. You can see that right there. We tilted the blade until the blade bevels were in contact with the stone, and then we just went ahead and worked it down until our edge bevels were pretty much completely gone, and then that thinned out the geometry quite a bit, and then we put a fresh edge on it. And honestly, now this thing is going to sit right here in the knife block, and I don't know when the last time I did use it. I don't know when the next time I'm going to use it. But on the last video, we did go over stones, okay? On that one, we used a Norton crystalline. This is one of the jumbo ones. This is within the last 5 years or so of production, and it's a really good stone. It cut really good and everything. Today, what we're going to do is I've got a chef's knife here. This is one of the Victorinox Fibrox chef's knives, 8-inch chef's knife. You know, for what this is and for the amount of money that these cost, I probably didn't buy this new. I probably got it at a flea market or something like that. And so I would guess I probably didn't pay more than maybe five bucks for it. But I think you can get these in the store or on Amazon for around 30 or so. You know, they're actually really good knives, and I think you get an awful lot of these like in commercial kitchens. You know, I mean, I make custom chef knives. Most of mine are out of 1095 high carbon steel, and most of them have got wooden handles on them. And I hear commercial kitchens they kind of frown on that. So these, I think, this kind of class of knife is probably one of the most used knives in, you know, like restaurants, commercial kitchen, stuff like that, because the handles are plastic, so you can't have any bacteria get into the pores or anything and grow. The handles are all sealed up really good because they're molded to the blade, and then the blades, of course, are stainless. So for what these are, they're actually really good knives, but they are also very, very thick at the edge. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. Before we go thinning it out, we're going to go over some of those reasons, just so that when we thin the knife out, we don't run into problems later. And then I'll show you how to thin the thing out some. These are made out of fairly soft stainless steel. Okay, fairly soft stainless steel is typically really strong. Okay, because it'll bend instead of break. All right, these edges are going to be quite a bit softer, so they'll roll instead of chip. Now, that's all fine and good for the strength standpoint, but since they are softer, you cannot run the edges near as thin as you can, you know, especially a high carbon steel at a much higher hardness. These are probably going to be in the neighborhood of 55, 60, 50, 55, 56, maybe 57 Rockwell. As a comparison, my 1095 typically runs in the 61, 62 Rockwell, somewhere around there. And I've heard some of your super steels, they're stable at, you know, 64, 65. So you can't run these near as thin as a much harder steel, just because the edge won't support it. It'll bend over and just lay over on its side. The second reason that these things have got fairly thick edges and fairly thick edge geometries is because the knife factory is factoring in a level of abuse that these knives are going to take. As a custom knife maker, most of my knife, like an 8-inch chef's knife from me, is $350 and up. Okay. Now, typically speaking, somebody's not going to take a $350 chef's knife and use it as a can opener. All right, they're probably also not going to be whacking the thing into, you know, crab legs, or, you know, taking it outside and chopping wood with it and all that kind of stuff. The same thing can't be said for a $30 production knife. Okay, these knives get the crap kicked out of them all day, every day. So the factory knows this, so to cut down on warranty issues, they grind them quite a bit thicker so that they'll withstand a certain level of abuse before people start having problems with them. Okay, now if you are looking for a video on how to thin out or regrind your knife, whether it's chef's knife, paring knife, pocket knife, whatever, more than likely you are not going to be thinning that edge out to where it cuts really good and things that it should be cutting, and you're not going to go out and you're not going to, you know, cut down trees with the thing, or, you know, use it to open cans, or, you know, any of that kind of stuff. So while we can't change the hardness, we can remove some of that extra metal so that the thing will cut as well as it can at that hardness. All right. So now we need to take a look at the blade itself so that we know where we are at, so that we know where we can go. This is, I'm guessing 3/30 seconds or a little bit over. 100 thousandths. Okay, 3/30 seconds is about 93, 94 thousandths, something like this. So it's 100 thousandths thick blade stock. And then the other two measurements that I typically take are 1/4 of an inch behind the cutting edge, which just so happens to correlate with the ram on this micrometer is 1/4 inch in diameter. So you put the edge of the ram on the edge of the cutting edge, and we come up with 35 thousandths thick, which is about 10 to 15 thousandths thicker than what I usually grind mine. Okay, I usually shoot for 20 to 25 thousandths of an inch thick at 1/4 inch back from the edge. The spine measurement will tell you how tough the knife is. That 1/4 inch back from the edge tells you how easily the knife is going to pass through the material that you're cutting. Thinner is better usually. And then the other measurement that I take is right at the shoulder of the edge, and this one measured out at 20 thousandths of an inch thick. On an 8-inch chef's knife, honestly on most knives, I typically run for or shoot for anywhere between 5 thousandths on like a paring knife to about 12 thousandths on an 8-inch chef. 20 thousandths of an inch thick, that's what I'll build a big chopper at. You know, I mean a big heavy chopper, you know, you use to cut wood with. So this can be thinned out considerably. Now, on our last, the last video in this short little, I think it's only going to be a 2 or 3 part series, we talked about using the Norton crystalline because it is a workhorse when it comes to removing material. And that's all we're going to do for the first part of this, okay? We don't really care about sharpening or how fine the edge is going to be. Right now, we just need to hog off some steel so that we can get the edge thin so that then we can sharpen it. So you can look at this more of a shaping type video. Now, for the shaping, in my mind, the Norton crystalline coarse fine it's got no equal, okay? This is the best that you can get. Like I said, this is the jumbo version. I got it like 5 years ago. I want to say it was a pretty expensive stone because it is the jumbo version. It was right around $100 or so. I think the 8-inch by 2-inch versions, I think they're still running $25 or so on Amazon. Now granted, that is the best stone in my mind for this type of work that is out there, okay? And you guys have seen my sharpening stone collection. I mean, I've got thousands of dollars worth of sharpening stones, and I'm telling you right now, these stones are the best for this type of work. Second best, and that is if you don't like working with oil, would be these King man-made water stones, okay? This type of work needs the 220 and the 1000 grit stone, okay? The other one, the one that I use the most, is a 1000, 6000 grit stone. But, you know, I use water stones, I use oil stones, you know, I don't really have, I mean, I prefer the oil stones for the majority of my work, but water stones, I don't have anything against them. Some people have got a strong preference, water stone or oil stone. So if you don't like the oil stones, knocking stones all over here, get the King 220 1000. Second choice, now this one's going to run you about 25, 28 bucks shipped on Amazon. Second choice in that line would be the Norton 220 1000 grit stone. The only reason the King wins out is because this is like a $50 or $60 stone, and that one's a $30 stone. This one is wider and everything, but this type of work is really hard on stones, and it typically dishes them out pretty quick. And so, you know, the narrower, smaller stones right there, if you're, you know, if you're shopping and you're on a budget, get that king. Okay, now that we got stones out of the way, and for oil, we're still using, well, this is bamboo oil, but if you look on the back of it, it says mineral oil. You can get mineral oil at ranch and home supply houses. I can't remember how much the last gallon I bought was, because I bought a whole gallon of it, and I think I'm only like a quarter of the way through it, and I want to say that whole gallon was like $16 or something like that. You know, you buy this fancy wooden bamboo oil, was like at Bed Bath & Beyond, you know, and I think this little bitty bottle was about that $15, $16. So yeah, buy it by the gallon, it's a little bit better. Okay, so now the geometry on this knife, we had 100 thousandths, or yeah, 100 thousandths thick at the spine. We had 35 thousandths thick, a 1/4 inch back, and we had 20 thousandths thick at the shoulder of the edge. Now we could go ahead and take this knife and lay it flat on the stone and, you know, abrade the whole, like from here to here, abrade that whole surface down to thin out the whole knife, right? If we did that, even with a crystalline coarse stone, we'd be at it for a couple hours, okay? It's just, that's just an awful lot of material to have to take away by hand on a stone. So our next best way to do this is going to be to what we call lay the edge back, okay? If you were to take, that's a pretty rounded edge, but so this blade is a straight full height flat grind, so there is no flat here. It's a straight grind from here to here. So if we lay that on the stone and we pick it up, right about there is where I feel the angle of the sharpening angle on the edge bevels, right? Now, that's because I sharpen at a fairly thin angle, or a very low angle, just my natural, that's the way I sharpen. I sharpen really, really low. In fact, you can see some scratch marks on the finish here because I sharpen so low. When you lay an edge back, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get the very edge as thin as you can get it, okay? So, but then that means that you don't have to grind the whole flat of the blade. So what we're going to do here is we're going to try to take that shoulder, if it's right about there, and we're going to try to push it back to about there. It's one of those things, it's a fairly small amount of material to remove, but it will make a world of difference in the cutting. Because now instead of trying to push, you know, 20 thousandths of an inch thick steel through your material, if we can get in that same area right there, yeah, 20 thousandths. If we can get it down to 10 thousandths, then that cuts that amount of steel that you have to push into your material to get the cut started, cuts it in half, all right? That's a big thing. So, I'll move you down here. See if I can get the stone in my face. I don't think I'm going to be able to. I tried to, maybe if I move a little bit farther away, maybe we can do that. Like I said, this is a new camera and I'm still getting used to it. I like it quite a bit, but that looks like it'll be about right. And I think in the video you're going to see me looking like over here when I'm talking. It's because I'm looking at the screen, which is right here, and then you guys are right there. So I'll have to work on that later. So anyway, so we are going to lay the blade flat down onto the stone, and then we are going to raise it up just ever so slightly to clear the finish, okay? And then we're just going to go to town on it. Because like I said, here, we're not really sharpening, and that's a rocky spot on the, we're not really sharpening, we're shaping, okay? We are just removing material just to get the edge thinned out so that we can sharpen it later. Thinner knives cut better, okay, because they don't have as much material to push through whatever it is that you're cutting. They cut better, they are easier to sharpen because you're not having to remove as much material each time you sharpen. They can take a little bit finer edge, generally speaking, most edges can be thinned out considerably. Now this is for using knives that are used in their element, okay? So a chef's knife, the thinner it gets within reason, okay, the better it's gonna perform as a chef's knife. The second you take that chef's knife outside and you start hacking on trees or, you know, trying to open tin cans, it's not gonna work quite so well. Now just that little bit, we widened up that edge bevel by about 1/3 or so. But I can tell I'm not getting near as many scratches on the finish as I should, so we're gonna drop it down even more. So instead of, that's flat, instead of there, we're gonna try to drop it to about there, all right? So if that's flat, the whole edge is right about there. I was sharpening there. I'm going to try to hold about like that. Now this, when you're grinding like this, the motion really does not matter. As long as it's a motion that you feel that you can hold the angle as close as you can, you know, go for it. So if you want to do, you know, straight forward and straight back, if you want to do circles the other way, you want to go like a kind of a forward and back motion like what I'm doing here. Anything that feels the most comfortable to be able to hold that angle, that's what you want to do. And this stone rocking is, we're going to have to move back. That's just not a very good spot. There we go. Now that is what we're after right there. See how that edge bevel now is twice what it was before? So right there is the new one. Right there, you can probably see it up in here a little bit. See how narrow this is versus how wide this is? Okay, so this will take a little bit. So I'm nice and wide here, and I'm down to being fairly narrow again from here up. So I need to work from here up a little bit more. Now if you'll notice on this stone, you see an awful lot of gray sludge. What that is stone particles. It is a little bit of steel also that we're grinding off of the knife, but for the most part it's mineral oil and it's stone particles. That is why these crystalline stones work as well as they do, is because they're almost like a man-made Japanese water stone in the fact that they're soft. So as you work your steel against that, the top layer of stone, those little bitty jagged edges of those grains in the stone are getting worn down. Once they start getting worn down to a certain point, then the extra pressure that you're putting on is actually cutting that top edge, the worn stone or the worn particles off, and exposing fresh new particles from underneath. That's why these stones cut as well as they do. Okay, so now I've got a nice wide edge bevel here and a nice wide edge bevel from here to about here, but from here to here I'm still kind of loose, or still kind of narrow. So we'll work harder right up in there. There we go. Now it's pretty even the entire length of the edge. And I'm starting to get a burr. Well, I've got burr in places. No, I've got a burr all the way. From the heel to the point, I've got a burr on this side. Since I was working on this side, now the burr is on this side. So now I do the same thing, only on the other side. Just one more before I see how wide that edge bevel is. Now see how narrow that one is. We need to catch this side up to the other side. Okay, I've already got a burr on the other side, which means that I mean, you can see that I've widened it out a little bit, but it still needs to get widened out some more. So we'll lay it down farther. There we go, now we're getting somewhere. Now see, that's about 2/3 of the width of the edge bevel on the other side. So just a little bit more to go. There we go. Now we are nice and wide from here to about here, and from here to about here. So we need a little bit of work in between my fingertips. This part right here, now you don't have to do this every time you sharpen, okay? This is just one of those things that you should just have to do, like, well, it depends on how much you cut, how heavy-handed you are, how hard the steel is, you know, all that sort of stuff. But you may only have to do this, you know, once every 2 or 3 years. Or you may have to do it once every 2 or 3 months. Just kind of depends on how much you're cutting and what you're cutting. Okay, so that's nice and wide now. All right. Now, what we need to do is switch to our fine side and clean up those scratches. Okay, now our scratch pattern went from the coarse scratch pattern to the fine scratch pattern. So now we can go ahead and sharpen the thing, right? Unless you're worried about the finish, okay? If you're worried about the finish, and you're working on a stainless steel blade, high carbon steel, it's gonna patina right over the top of all these scratches, okay? Within a month of use, you probably won't even notice that they're there anymore. With stainless steel that doesn't patina, you might not like that laid back edge bevel look, right? The easiest way to get rid of that, this 320 or 320 grit fine side of the Norton crystalline is going to leave kind of a hazy finish on the steel. But what you can do is you take yourself a piece of steel or a piece of wood or whatever it is that you've got, and then just wrap the thing with sandpaper. This is 600 grit sandpaper. This is what I use over on my sanding stick. So I'll typically bolt this up to my sanding stick and then use both hands on this sanding stick to clean the finish up. If you're just cleaning the edge like this up, pretty much what you'll do here, there, is put your sandpaper on the edge of your table or on the edge of your bench, okay? Then raise it up, or you raise your spine up, and at the same edge angle that you use to sharpen it, just go forward and back. Do kind of a stropping motion, like, so I'm not going this way, okay? If I was to be going this way, it'd be cutting into my sandpaper. Can you see that? No, you can't. If I was to go this and in this direction, I'd slice my sandpaper up, okay? So you want to go forward and back like this, and while moving the knife this way, okay? And that'll keep you from cutting your sandpaper as much. Now you see how that cleaned up just the edge bevels? Now we've still got, all these scratches on the side of the blade. We can clean them up to some degree just by leaving it flat. See, that cleaned up those scratches quite a bit. The only problem is the, this knife is just kind of scratched up anyway, so all your other scratches are going to show through. So anyway, so now that we've got our edge thinned out, and then we've got the majority of our scratches off. Now we need to go ahead and sharpen the thing, right? So at our normal sharpening angle, which is going to be a little bit higher than what we were sharpening or what we were shaping at, okay, we just need to lighten up our pressure and go for a burr on one side. And there it is. We got a nice 320 grit burr or so. Now we go the other way. Now we have a nice 320 grit burr evenly along the whole edge the other way. Now what we need to do is decrease our pressure considerably and just refine that burr. We're just getting that burr to where it's as refined and as light as we can get it. Okay, that's a pretty light burr that's on there, and it feels pretty even. So now what we need to do is we need to shear the burr off. With a relatively, coarse stone like this, it being a 320 grit or so, you can think about the burr as being the same size as the grit that was used to create it. Okay, so a burr that was raised on a 320 grit silicon carbide stone is going to be considerably heavier, you know, as in thicker in cross section, than the burr that was created on a 6,000 grit waterstone. Okay, a 6,000 grit waterstone burr, you look at that thing cross-eyed and that burr just falls off. Okay, so you can take a nicely prepared 6,000 grit burr and remove it off of a piece of steel just by dragging it through a soft piece of wood, a piece of cork, the rubber on the bottom of your tennis shoe, a piece of leather. You know, you can strop it off really easy on either a pasted strop or a wooden strop, like, you know, the side of a 2x4, or I mean pretty much anything. The burr on a 320 grit stone, okay, it's going to be an awful lot tougher because it's thicker in cross section. Okay, so what we need to do is, my favorite way is to shear that burr off. Okay, what that does is it steepens up your final edge angle by just a little bit, 10 to 15 to 20 degrees on each side. So you get the benefit of a little bit steeper sharpening angle while keeping a nice thin edge angle. It leaves the grit size on your final edge. So if you want an edge that is, you know, a good all-around edge, something that's very aggressive, and the second that edge contacts something, it's ripping and tearing and biting it, right? Very, very aggressive edge. That 320 grit stone is a really good edge finish. I usually like anything between 250 and like 400, maybe 600 depending upon the stone. This one will leave you a nice finish. You noticed I was oiling up the surface of the stone and wiping it and trying to make sure that I got all the loose grit off the top of the stone. When you shear that burr off, we're going to be doing edge leading strokes. So I'm going to be trying to cut the top of the stone off. Okay, so any loose grit is going to act like a giant boulder to that edge, and it's going to hammer into that boulder and it's going to dent the edge, right? So we want to make sure that all those loose particles are off of there. So it's just the top layer of the stone at the moment. And with very, very light pressure, just enough pressure to get the stone to cut, we're going to shear that burr off. Okay, this is where the art form of shearing burrs come in. There's always going to be variances in stones, the oil that you're using to lubricate the stone, the steel type that you're using, and the amount of pressure that you're putting on. The big idea is to cut just enough to shear that burr off, but not cut so much that you create a new burr in the process. Okay, and that just takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of kind of touchy-feely play around with it until you get it right. There's two things that you have to be concerned with. One of them is pressure, and then the other one is you know, how many strokes. Typically on one of my 1095 knives, one stroke or two strokes on each side, so one, two, and that'll be perfect. These softer stainless steels, sometimes they take an extra stroke or two because that steel will want to tend to move and not get abraded quite so much. Okay, so our sharpening angle is at about here, and you guys can't see that. Our sharpening angle is at about here. All right, now we're going to raise it up 10, 15, 20 degrees, somewhere in that general neighborhood, and very, very, just the weight of the blade passes, shear that burr off. Now that moved the burr to the other side. Now there's not much of that burr left, but it is in places. Okay, I think we've got it. Now, there's no light reflecting off the edge. Let's see. Well, that arm's pretty bald. tons of hair just peeling off, right? Now, since we laid that edge back, like I said, them edge bevels are about twice as wide as what they were before. So if we try to measure, now we can't measure at the shoulder of the edge anymore. I mean, we could, but it won't give us the same reading, okay? But what we can do is kind of remember where we measured before and then measure at that, try to hit that same spot. So about where I think I measured before, we were at about 20 thousandths, and we've dropped it down to about 14 thousandths. That knife is going to cut so much better than what it did, even if they were both starting out at the same level of sharpness, like if they could both take hair off my arm. This one will cut so much better just because it doesn't have to force so much steel in that initiation of the cut. Okay, so since we laid that edge back, now that edge can cut twice as deep before it runs into the wall of steel, which is the body of the blade. All right, and we didn't go so thin that I don't think that that steel is going to support that thinner edge either. So, so this is just another option that you've got, right? So you can lay the whole edge back, or regrind the whole flat, or you can just lay back the shoulder. Boys, hey, he's just bringing you more food. The FedEx guy just pulled up. You don't have to do this every time you sharpen, but you can. All right, if you take this knife now and you take it in the kitchen and you go make fajitas or something for dinner tonight, right? And you notice that, well, fajitas, no, that's just thin peppers. Well, you might tell on the onion. And you think, you know, the edge is cutting an awful lot better, but it still feels like it's a little on the thick side. Well, then the next time the edge needs sharpened, go ahead and lay that edge back a little bit more, or a lot more, you know, whatever you think you need. Once you start getting to the point where you start getting edge damage, let's say, you know, you're cutting along with it just fine, and then your wife picks it up, she's going to help you make dinner, and then she goes up to an onion and she pushes a whole lot of force behind it because the last time she used it, it was dull and that's what she needed, and it slams that edge into the cutting board, and you look at the edge and all of a sudden it rolled it over. Okay, well now, if she's going to be using that knife on a regular basis, you might want to let the edge thicken up through the next couple of sharpenings. Or if you think, you know what, I'm just not going to leave it out to where she can touch it anymore, well then put it right back to where it was. But you can play around with that an awful lot and really fine-tune your edges to where they cut really well to your preference, your cutting style, your the amount of force that you typically use, whatever it is that you typically cut, all that kind of stuff. You can change that geometry big time just with a simple old bench stone. And like I said, you can either lay the edge back just a little bit and do not very much work, or you can spend hours thinning out the whole side of the blade. You know, it's entirely up to you and you know, how much time you have to devote to this and how much interest you have to devote to this too. So again, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can visit me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we will see you next time.